Tyler O'Neill was one of the game's brightest stars in 2021 for the St. Louis Cardinals. A true five-tool player, O'Neill's bodybuilder frame and elite speed made him a physical specimen, and he put it all together for a masterful season, hitting between two of the game's brightest stars in Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. Now the year is 2024, and O'Neill's once again putting up MVP-type numbers, but this time for the Boston Red Sox. Surely O'Neill signed with Boston for a mega deal or was traded away for an absolute haul. No, O'Neill's fall from greatness happened seemingly overnight in St. Louis, with his trade value whittling its way down to an average reliever and a throw-in prospect. How on earth did we get here? How did Tyler O'Neill go from a bright star with one of baseball's most historic organizations to being traded away for cents on the dollar? How did Tyler O'Neill go from one of the outfielders the Cardinals bet on while giving away other future all-stars to someone who they were looking to offload any way they could? Why did Tyler O'Neill struggle to regain that monster form he had in 2021 during his final 2 years in St. Louis? To answer those questions, we need to look back at the rise, the fall, and the rebirth of Tyler O'Neill. Tyler O'Neill was born in 1995 in British Columbia, Canada, and his father is a famous Canadian bodybuilder, if you couldn't already tell by O'Neill's frame. In fact, here's a picture of O'Neill's father, Terry O'Neill, pictured with his friend, the Terminator. O'Neill attended Garibaldi High School and actually grew up a fan of the Seattle Mariners. O'Neill was a top prospect coming out of high school, and as childhood dreams come true when the Mariners selected him in the third round of the 2013 MLB draft. O'Neill's power immediately showed at the lower levels of the Mariners farm system, hitting 70 home runs in his first 325 games between rookie ball and Double-A. Prospects like O'Neill flame out all the time, drafted with big-time power, all the promise in the world, but once they face professional pitching, it all falls apart. That was not the case for O'Neill, as he quickly went from a fun, high upside prospect to the number 36 ranked prospect in all of baseball entering the 2017 season. O'Neill was on the brink of reaching the major leagues, but in his first half a season of AAA, it was a bit of a struggle for him. O'Neill's power was very much still there, but his batting average dropped 50 points from where it was in Double-A, and it was much closer to a league average hitter than the powerful, middle-of-the-order bat that the Mariners were beginning to see him as. Still, O'Neill was just 22 years old, so there was no reason to panic, but as national prospect lists began to drop O'Neill down their rankings, the Mariners were also becoming more and more willing to part with O'Neill in an effort to upgrade their rotation. On July 21st, 2017, the Seattle Mariners are right in the thick of the American League wildcard race, desperate for their first October appearance since 2001. Their offense was fairly productive in the first half, but their starting rotation was a mess, with club legend Felix Hernandez regressing and subpar seasons from every starting pitcher not named James Paxton. St. Louis sat below 500 at 47 and 49, but also remained in the mix for both the NL Central and the NL wildcard. It was unclear whether or not the club would be buyers or sellers, but rumors swirled that they were interested in adding a big bat to their lineup like third baseman Josh Donaldson, or one of the Marlins' young outfielders in Giancarlo Stanton, Marcell Ozuna, or Christian Yelich. They even explored upgrading the rotation, attempting to deal for Athletics' young ace Sonny Gray before the Yankees swooped in and made a deal. Instead, the Cardinals' lone move of the deadline was shipping some of their pitching depth in the form of Marcos Gonzalez to the Mariners in exchange for O'Neill. While the deal itself in a vacuum appeared to be a shrewd move for the Cardinals front office, fans were dumbfounded by the lack of activity from St. Louis, standing pat outside of acquiring O'Neill rather than making a strong push for the playoffs or selling off valuable pieces. This resulted in the Cardinals missing the playoffs for the second straight season, the first time that had happened since 2007 and 2008. At the time of the trade, John Mozeliak was excited about the offensive upside that O'Neill had, adding to their options at the AAA level and hoping that he would become a long-term solution in their outfield that had become a revolving door in recent seasons. Since the death of top prospect Oscar Taveras in 2014, the Cardinals had been searching for a long-term answer to their outfield problems. Whether it was trading for Jason Hayward, signing Dexter Fowler, or the promise of prospects like Randall Grichuk, Tommy Pham, Harrison Bader, and Steven Piscotty, the club had yet to find that missing piece. Upon his arrival to Memphis, O'Neill continued to mash the ball, posting a .253, .304, .548 slash line with 12 home runs and 39 RBIs in just 37 games played, finishing with 31 home runs between the Cardinals and Mariners AAA affiliates. While the early returns on O'Neill were promising, his walk rate decreased, his strikeout rate remained high, so it was clear that O'Neill would need more seasoning before getting an opportunity in St. Louis. That offseason, the Cardinals finally got their middle-of-the-order bat in Marlins Marcell Ozuna, who was coming coming off an all-star campaign with Miami and set to claim one of the Cardinals' outfield spots alongside a crowded group of Tommy Pham, Dexter Fowler, and Harrison Bader. The Cardinals did ship off both Randall Grichuk and Steven Piscotty that winter, clearing the way for O'Neill to power his way to St. Louis if he could have a strong campaign for Memphis in 2018. After injuries robbed O'Neill from making the Cardinals' opening day roster, the young slugger hit 6 home runs in his first 12 games with Memphis and finally got the call to make his MLB debut with St. Louis in Chicago. It was an anticlimactic start for O'Neill with the Cardinals, as he only received 7 at-bats and 1 start during his 6 games with the club, going hitless in all of those appearances before being sent back down to Memphis. O'Neill continued his strong campaign in AAA, posting a .319, .333, and .708 slash line through the middle of May, showing he could pair his plus power with improved contact rates in order to do consistent damage, and was regaining his plus walk rate as he chased less pitches against minor league opponents. O'Neill was recalled to St. Louis for a home game against the Phillies on May 18th and recorded his first ever big league hit before slugging his first big league home run on a ball he crushed to left field on May 19th. O'Neill was sent back and forth from St. Louis to Memphis throughout the 2018 season due to an outfield logjam and various injuries that occurred for him, finishing the year with a 116 WRC plus and a 1.1 WAR in 61 games played. After making the Cardinals' opening day roster in 2019, O'Neill once again missed significant time due to injuries and spent half the year in Memphis. O'Neill took steps back in his overall offensive performance, but did see improvements to his strikeout rate and walk rate. The 2020 pandemic season was full of oddities for both O'Neill and the Cardinals. Still yet to play a full season in the big leagues, O'Neill was tasked with serving as the club's starting left fielder. Due to a COVID outbreak amongst the team during their road trip to Minnesota, the club went 17 straight days without playing a game and were forced to squeeze in 55 games in just 49 days. O'Neill, who had spent much of the last 2 seasons on the injured list, appeared in 50 of the Cardinals' 60 games, and although he struggled to make contact consistently, saw a major uptick in his isolated power once again and won his first career Gold Glove for the Cardinals. 3 seasons filled with injuries, promotions and demotions, and a pandemic left the perception of O'Neill as a tantalizing talent, but far from a proven commodity. The Cardinals were banking on his potential once again that offseason, and it paid off in a major way in 2021. O'Neill started the 2021 season out with a bang, homering for the second consecutive opening day as the Cardinals throttled the Cincinnati Reds 11-6. O'Neill carried that momentum through the first 29 games of his season, posting an .820 OPS and playing elite defense in left field. But just as the Cardinals thought they had a reliable left fielder in their lineup, O'Neill broke his finger sliding into second base against the Padres. O'Neill missed the next 2 weeks of baseball before returning on May 27th for a road series in Arizona. Coming off the injured list, Cardinals fans couldn't help but see O'Neill as a talented, yet too often injured player. There were real questions about whether or not O'Neill could manage to play more than half a season, and so the pressure was on O'Neill to both produce and stay on the field upon his return. And boy, did he deliver. From May 27th till the end of the season, O'Neill was one of the best players in all of baseball. O'Neill posted a .275, .333, .546 slash line with 15 home runs and 37 RBIs during the first half of the season, resulting in a 133 WRC+. For the first time in his career, O'Neill was healthy and maximizing his potential on the field. The talent was always there, and playing consistently was a huge part of his newfound success, but there were also improvements to his approach at the plate that played a major factor in his rise as one of the game's brightest young stars. The biggest difference between O'Neill's first 3 MLB seasons to his breakout 2021 campaign was his ability to be aggressive with pitches he knew he could do damage with and laying off pitches both in and outside the zone that he was less effective against. O'Neill feasted on pitches in the heart of the plate or inside, and so he became extremely aggressive with those pitches and swung at less pitches thrown on the outer half of the plate or outside the zone. You can see the massive uptick in results here thanks to some graphs from True Media. If you compare O'Neill's swing data from 2018 to 2020 to his swing decisions in 2021, you'll see a significant uptick in the pitches that O'Neill swung at that were in the middle of the zone or in the inner half, and a noticeable decline in the pitches he swung at on the outer half or chased outside the zone. O'Neill's raw strength and incredible bat speed allow him to crush baseballs, so maximizing the swings he's taking and ensuring he does damage more often than not transformed him from a league average bat to a legitimate MVP candidate. Taking a look at O'Neill's heat maps, you'll see that most of his damage at the plate before 2021 was done in the middle or inner half of the plate already, but that red zone grew exponentially during the 2021 season as he became better at recognizing which pitches he could swing at. O'Neill's ability to force opposing pitchers to challenge him in the middle to inner half of the zone gave the slugger a huge advantage when he was at the plate. There was another shift toward the middle of the season that helped O'Neill see better and better pitches. Manager Mike Shildt began to hit O'Neill third in the order, slotted right in between future Hall of Famers Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. While O'Neill was one of the hottest bats in all of baseball, Goldschmidt would go on to finish 6th in MVP voting that year, and Arenado was an all-star, so slotting him in between those guys meant that pitchers had to attack O'Neill more often than not. While the first half of the season was already incredible for O'Neill, it's the second half run that both he and the Cardinals went on that was truly magical. O'Neill's OPS shot above 900 the rest of the season, and he posted a 151 WRC plus from the All-Star break on. But what the Cardinals fans will never forget is the historic win streak that O'Neill helped propel the club to. On July 30th, the Cardinals were 9.5 games back of the NL Central and 7 games back of the NL wildcard, and were desperate for help in their starting rotation. So desperate, in fact, that the club had traded for a pair of veteran left-handers in J.A. Happ and John Lester while signing lefty Wade LeBlanc to fill out their rotation. Those moves felt like a club that was just wanting to get through the remainder of the season, not make an aggressive playoff push. The Cardinals clawed their way to just 3 games back of the NL wildcard by September 11th, but still had just an 8% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs. While there was still a chance for the Cardinals to fight their way to the postseason, it was becoming more and more unlikely. But then, the Cardinals did the impossible. From September 11th to September 28th, St. Louis went on a 17-game winning streak, gaining a firm grasp on the second NL wildcard and clinching their playoff berth on their 17th straight win, facing the eventual NL Central champion Brewers. It was one of the most incredible streaks in baseball history, and Tyler O'Neill was the main catalyst for their success. During that last month of baseball, O'Neill had an OPS north of 1,000, a 189 WRC plus, and matched 13 home runs with 30 runs driven in during his final 32 games of the season. O'Neill led the National League in home runs, RBIs, runs scored, and slugging percentage for that period, and was also the major league leader or co-leader in all of those categories, resulting in him winning the National League Player of the Month for September. O'Neill's incredible 2021 season saw him finish with a 286, 352, 560 slash line while slugging 34 home runs and 89 RBIs in the middle of the Cardinals order. He led the club in both F4 and WRC plus and finished 8th in National League Most Valuable Player voting while winning his second consecutive Gold Glove. Matched up with the 106-win Dodgers in the NL wildcard game, Cardinals ace Adam Wainwright pitched a gem against future Hall of Famer and St. Louis native Max Scherzer, giving the Cardinals offense every opportunity to take a winner-take-all game. It ended up being a rough night for Tyler O'Neill at the plate, as he went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts, but did manage to draw a walk and steal a base. The entire Cardinals offense went cold that night, though, outside of Tommy Edman, and the Cardinals recorded just 5 hits and 1 run in that game. It looked like the clubs would be heading toward extra innings before NL Manager of the Year Mike Shildt brought in struggling closer Alex Reyes. Reyes was incredible in the first half of the season, but completely lost his feel on the mound in the second half. Reyes left a hanging slider for Chris Taylor in the bottom of the ninth, and Cardinals fans can still visualize what happened next. It was a disappointing end to the 2021 season for O'Neill and the Cardinals. Their historic run at the end of the season did enough to propel them to an unlikely playoff berth, but the magic faded in Los Angeles and the club was faced with major question marks that offseason. President of Baseball Operations John Mozeliak fired manager Mike Shildt over philosophical differences, and the club promoted bench coach Oliver Marmol to manager the following season. To help fix their rotation, St. Louis brought in left-handed starter Steven Matz before the MLB lockout occurred, and once spring training got underway, they signed baseball legend Albert Pujols to a 1-year deal for a send-off season alongside fellow Cardinal greats Yadier Molina and Adam Wainwright. Even so, the Cardinals were looking to their new MV3 in the form of Goldschmidt, O'Neill, and Arenado to carry them to success once again in 2022. But things quickly went south for O'Neill as the year got underway. Due to the MLB lockout prior to the 2022 season, player arbitration cases lingered into the season, and O'Neill was eventually defeated by the Cardinals in their arbitration hearing in mid-May after they failed to reach a long-term extension that winter. Represented by super agent Scott Boras, O'Neill was seeking long-term security that reflected his status as a star in today's game, but St. Louis was unwilling to meet the asking price. It was clear that the arbitration process put a strain on O'Neill and the Cardinals' relationship, but both sides were hopeful for a strong 2022 campaign and a long-term partnership. Despite homering for the 3rd consecutive of opening day, the months of April and May were rough at the plate for O'Neill. Up until the decision on his arbitration, O'Neill slashed 198, 267, 317 with just 2 home runs and was 35% below league average offensively. For a player who struggled with injuries his entire career, the failure to secure a long-term deal created headaches for him on the field, and then on May 19th, he landed on the injured list with a right shoulder impingement that sidelined him until June 7th. Upon O'Neill's return, he was on fire, slashing 318, 354, 477 with 2 home runs and 8 RBI in just 44 at-bats. But then history repeated itself again with O'Neill as he suffered a hamstring injury while rounding first base, which sidelined him for another month. O'Neill made his return from the IL on July 14th and had played just 44 games by the midway point of the season. The Cardinals were 3 games back at the NL wildcard at that point and were getting MVP seasons from Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. The Cardinals had lacked that third impact bat while O'Neill was out for most of the first half, but Albert Pujols had started to turn back the clock in pursuit of reaching the 700 home run club. If Goldschmidt, Arenado, and Pujols were going to be 3 of the best hitters in baseball the rest of the season, the idea of adding the kind of production that O'Neill could provide to that lineup had the potential to launch the Cardinals into World Series contention. But O'Neill's injuries could no longer be ignored. Could the Cardinals actually rely on him upon his return? Or was it worth looking to add one more bat to the lineup that could put them over the top? The club was also having starting pitching woes, so it was unlikely that they could address both needs at the deadline. At that same time, the Washington Nationals made it clear that they were open to moving superstar Juan Soto for a massive haul. While multiple teams were in the running for Soto, it became clear as the deadline drew near that the Cardinals and the Padres were the 2 hottest suitors for Soto. While multiple factors played into the Cardinals passing on a Juan Soto trade, with the greatest of which being the fact that they'd have to give up a historic haul of prospects headlined by guys like Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, Dylan Carlson, and many others, they hoped internally that O'Neill could round out the middle of their order on their way toward the playoffs. Instead of going all in on Juan Soto, St. Louis opted to deal for Pirates starter Jose Quintana and swap their injured center fielder Harrison Bader for Yankee starter Jordan Montgomery. Both Quintana and Montgomery helped fortify the Cardinals' rotation and made their playoff push in August and September seamless. But the trade of Bader forced the Cardinals to move outfielder Dylan Carlson to center field and start their 4th outfielder Lars Nootbaar every day. It became paramount that O'Neill stay on the field and produce, as they had now committed to a group of O'Neill, Carlson, and Nootbaar to lead their outfield in October. While O'Neill was not himself at the plate upon his return, he was able to give the Cardinals value with his defense in left field and producing 14% above league average at the plate for the next 50 games. Were the Cardinals and O'Neill hoping for more than that from his bat? Yes. But Nootbaar and Pujols' scorching hot second halves helped make up for his regression. But even as the Cardinals forged their way to an NL Central title, O'Neill continued to struggle with injuries. A bad knee kept him out of various games down the stretch and hindered his on-field performance, and on September 17th, just a few weeks away from the postseason, O'Neill landed on the injured list once again with another hamstring strain. O'Neill was optimistic that he could be back in time for the Wild Card Series against the Philadelphia Phillies, and while he tested his hamstring in the Arizona Fall League to try and make a return, the Cardinals ultimately left him off the Wild Card Series roster and would lose to the Phillies in 2 games. Tense arbitration battles, a decline in performance, and a variety of injuries in 2022 left a bad taste in the mouths of O'Neill, the Cardinals, and their fans headed into the offseason. Cardinals' postseason failures were not O'Neill's fault, but all sides had to wonder how much better they could have been with a healthy O'Neill. With 2021 being the lone year that O'Neill was mostly healthy since he had been acquired in 2018, St. Louis needed O'Neill to make changes to the way he took care of his body. There were lots of questions regarding how durable O'Neill could be with the sheer muscle mass as he continued to deal with soft tissue injuries. So the outfielder spent his offseason in St. Louis working on a new fitness program to promote flexibility and stay on the field for an entire season. Entering spring training in 2023, the Cardinals and O'Neill made a surprise announcement that he would be competing with outfielder Dylan Carlson for the club's center field job. O'Neill had been a Gold Glover in left field 2 times now. While the thought of maximizing his bat and defense in center field must have been enticing for both sides, it left a lot of people scratching their heads as O'Neill's focus was supposed to be on staying healthy this year. But with the emergence of Lars Nootbaar in 2022 and top prospect Jordan Walker on the brink of his MLB debut, the Cardinals wanted to give Walker a chance to make the club out of camp. and his best shot of doing so was allowing O'Neal to pursue his wish of playing in center field. After putting up great numbers in a small sample size for Team Canada during the World Baseball Classic, O'Neal won the center field job out of camp and would be flanked by Nootbaar and Walker in the corners come opening day, with Carlson being relegated to a bench role. O'Neal, for the fourth straight opening day, went deep for the Cardinals and helped showcase how great their lineup could be with him in center field every day. But outside of that opening day performance, the first 7 games of the season were pretty mediocre for O'Neal. And as the club got off to a slow start, the Cardinals' relationship with O'Neal came crashing down on April 4th in a home game against the Atlanta Braves. Trailing 4-1 in the bottom of the 7th, O'Neal was on second base when Brendan Donovan smoked a line drive to right field where outfielder Ronald Acuna Jr. quickly got to the ball. With a rocket for an arm, it would have been difficult to score, but a player with O'Neal's speed had a chance. O'Neal appeared to be jogging, or at least not giving 100% maximum effort on his move from second base, and after being sent home by third base coach Pop Warner, was easily thrown out by Acuna, ending the Cardinals' rally as they lost 4-1. After the game, when asked about the play, manager Oliver Marmol said, "We've got a lot of guys playing really hard, and that's not our style of play as far as the effort rounding the base there. It's unacceptable." When pressed further, asking if O'Neal may have been hesitant rounding third as he thought he may be held up, Marmol doubled down saying, "Bottom line, that's not his judgment, and that's why we have a coach standing over there. Your effort's 100% until you're told not to." The controversy brewed further as O'Neal immediately refuted the notion that he was not giving 100% effort following the game, saying Marmol's comments were blunt, but he's out there working hard every day to stay on the field. O'Neal later referenced some running mechanics they worked on this offseason with him to improve his durability and said maybe that played a role in the play, but ultimately he did not appreciate having his effort challenged. When John Mozeliak caught wind of those comments, he told Bally Sports Midwest that the expectation for the St. Louis Cardinals is that when we play, we give 100%. And although he understood players trying to protect their bodies, the expectation is players go full throttle. From that moment on, the Cardinals and Tyler O'Neill seemed headed toward an ugly breakup. O'Neill later commented on an episode of Foul Territory this offseason, quote, "I think in the moment I handled it the right way. Obviously you don't want to create any division like that. It was quite the situation for sure. You know, I'm happy it's all behind us. And Ollie and I were able to move past it. At the end of the day, it turned into respect at an arm's length." Hey, he said him and Ollie moved past it, but respect at an arm's length isn't exactly a healthy working relationship. O'Neill ended up landing on the injured list in May with a back injury, and while initial reports indicated he may be out up to a month, his injury stint lasted until July 20th. While O'Neill seemed to regain his form upon his return, controversy continued to strike as O'Neill would ask to be removed from lineups due to soreness or fear of re-injuring himself. In fact, he only appeared in one game of their road series with the Rays, out of caution for how his knee would react to playing on turf. O'Neill was 13% above league average at the plate for the rest of the year, finally having his season end with one final injury list stint due to a foot injury. In total, O'Neill played in just 70 games in 2023, slashing .231, .312, .403 with 9 home runs to show for it. In the 2 seasons following his incredible 2021 campaign, O'Neill played in just 50% of the Cardinals games and was a below league average hitter in both seasons. Following the 2023 season, it felt like only a matter of time before the Cardinals either non-tendered Tyler O'Neill or traded him elsewhere. Although he was just 2 years removed from an MVP-like season, O'Neill's value was at an all-time low, and his trade market wasn't helped by the fact that everyone in baseball knew the Cardinals wanted to move him. In fact, when Mozeliak was asked in the offseason about their outfield, he was blunt in saying that their starting group would be Nootbaar, Edman, and Walker, with Dylan Carlson as the 4th outfielder, and that they were shopping Tyler O'Neill. Mozeliak acknowledged that the coming move was obvious and that in the end, it was probably best for everyone involved, but then went on to joke that O'Neill would end up getting MVP votes this coming season. It has become a trend over the last number of years that the outfielders the Cardinals part with go on to have better careers elsewhere. Adolis Garcia, Randy Rosarina, Blaine Thomas, and Marcell Ozuna are the names that first come to mind. So while Mozeliak was making that joke tongue-in-cheek, he knew the risk the Cardinals were taking of letting go of yet another depressed asset. On December 8th, 2023, the St. Louis Cardinals agreed to send Tyler O'Neill to the Boston Red Sox for reliever Nick Robertson and depth prospect Victor Santos. This officially marked the end of O'Neill's time in St. Louis, as both sides hoped to rebound from disastrous seasons. As the 2024 season got underway, O'Neill set an MLB record, homering in his 5th straight opening day as the Cardinals brass watched from afar, fearing another outfielder had gotten away. O'Neill has gone on a tear ever since. We are just 33 games into the 2024 season, but O'Neal's among the MLB leaders in home runs with 10, and his 159 WRC plus puts him among the early favorites for American League Most Valuable Player. While it's far too early to know if he can win the award, he's well on his way toward receiving votes, as Mozeliak's comments in November echoed before. Meanwhile, the Cardinals are off to another disappointing start, with fans and media both wondering if major changes are coming soon in St. Louis. While there are a number of reasons why the Cardinals have declined over the last few years, it's hard to ignore that players like O'Neal are moving on and playing much better in their new environments. If you compare the swing data from O'Neal's last 2 seasons in St. Louis to his 2024 campaign with Boston, you'll see some changes in his process so far. While it's a small sample size, you'll notice that O'Neal is targeting the middle quadrants of the plate both vertically and horizontally. And once again, his slugging percentage heat map has grown significantly from years prior. Tyler O'Neal's story is far from over, but the early returns on life after St. Louis do not bode well for the Cardinals' track record. While O'Neal has to own some of his own struggles in St. Louis and his inability to stay on the field, the Cardinals clearly need to look in the mirror and figure out why they continue to drive away young talent. Regardless, we couldn't be happier for O'Neal and his career resurgence, and it's just unfortunate that it could not happen here in St. Louis. For now, that's the story of the rise, the fall, and the rebirth of Tyler O'Neal. I'm sure this topic will be revisited a number of times over the next few years. The Cardinals need to learn from a story that could not have been any more exciting back in 2021, but is now just another ghost from their past. If you enjoyed this video essay on the career of Tyler O'Neal so far, consider subscribing to our channel, Deal in the Cards, for our St. Louis Cardinals podcast and future essays like this. If you want to check out some of our other video essays, check out the videos on your screen now. We'll see you next time on Deal in the Cards.